So you see, here's the problem. And if you can help me figure out the internet, you want to talk about free will, you help me figure this out, you're a genius. You're already a genius because you're trying to keep people off of your operating table. But anyone can go put a song up on YouTube. This song, someone just uploaded the song. This is not uploaded by the band or the company that owns the song or anything else. It's just up on YouTube. It's up 10,000 different ways on YouTube. You can hear it live. You can hear it semi-live. You can hear this version, which is the studio version, all put up by different people. But somehow, if I play a piece of it while I'm doing a podcast, no go, can't be done. Explain that to me, YouTube. Explain to me how the world works, because you guys are doing this. I just want to know. I get it. When I talk to my buddy Don Coddington, the billionaire Don Coddington that works in music, works for one of the biggest music companies in the world. And he'll go, well, look, you don't want anyone stealing your content and putting it up for free. Well, okay, first of all, my shit ends up on YouTube all the time, my movies and everything else. I have to actively go to YouTube every time and say, hey, take it down. I get it. So I get it. It, in some sense, it's stealing on some weird level. But why can't I play a small portion of it on YouTube, yet someone could put up the song or the album in its entirety? It could have 20 million downloads. I've seen things with hundreds of millions of downloads. No exaggeration. No problem. No problem. But YouTube would take down if I played that 30 seconds on YouTube. You have any knowledge of it? Why is that, Phil?
Well, I think it all comes back to the, the control of information that is being kind of forced upon us. It's real interesting. I obviously see it around medicine and around health, but, there are certainly pieces of information that are put out there by certain entities that are, heavily promoted and allowed to be spread and never questioned. And then there are other pieces of information that are judged to be wrong and labeled as misinformation these days. And, restrictions are put on things. And it makes it real difficult for the average person out there to figure out, what's really going on and what is the information that's going to be most beneficial to them. So ultimately, I think, the thing that guys like you and I are trying to accomplish is getting the information that's going to help people to the people. And that's becoming increasingly difficult.
Well, it's not becoming difficult. It's becoming impossible. Like, speaking of impossible, I'm doing a whole movie right now. It's going to be out. I wanted to get it out by the end of the year. It looks like, we're going to have it pre-sale before Christmas, so people could do the pre-sale. It'll be out in January. But the movie, it's about, all these fake meats, right? And I went down rabbit holes to do this movie. I started going down rabbit holes about 2 years ago and looking into it before I put my last movie out. During the COVID year, I just spent time looking at this stuff. Some people look at Instagram all day long and look at TikTok or do something. My thing is, I just like going down rabbit holes of things that interest me. And it's like, okay, we have this fake meat industry. At the time, it was going over $1 billion industry. Now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And during the time when I started making this movie, all the big tech engineers, all the, the guys that started Microsoft and everything else, Bill Gates, they started throwing billions into this. And I'm sitting there going, okay, I smell a big rat here, because they're saying good for you, good for the planet on fake meat. And my first thought is, this is a highly processed food. How can it be good for us? When it says good for you, good for us, it's highly processed. So I have to go down that rabbit hole, and I need to go deep. I need to go all the way down the rabbit hole till I get to the rabbits and see how many rabbits are in there, right? And then good for the planet. Okay, good good for the planet, you would have to assume at least two things. Number one, that cows are bad for the planet. We know that that's categorically wrong. You don't need to have a scientific degree. You don't have to be Frank Mitlerner to know that ruminants are the reason that things grow on the planet. Cows are not the only ruminants. A deer is a ruminant, for instance. We need to go kill all the deers? Is it deers or deer? I think it's deer, is the plural of deer. Number one, we would have to kill all the buffalo. We would have to kill all the cattle that are now here. We would have to do a lot of killing in order to get ruminants off the planet. So good for the planet? No, we need ruminants. That's what keeps the soil healthy, right? And then they go, well, then I'll look at something else. Okay, if they're engineering food, they're doing that inside of a factory. They're sending plumes of crap out of the factory. And then I started looking deeper and found out that a lot of this stuff is created in places like China. Nothing wrong with China, but we're selling this shit in Western Europe and the United States. So now we have another problem. We have to ship this stuff. You know what it takes to ship stuff? A little something called diesel. And lots of it. You got to keep this stuff refrigerated or whatever in the hell else you got to do to it. You got to ship it across a planet. You know how much CO2 that puts? You know how much greenhouse gas that causes just to get it to your food place, to get it to Whole Foods, to Sprouts, to Costco, wherever you buy food from. I don't know where you buy your food, but it's not even starting off here. They have to ship all of this stuff. I have a whole movie coming out about this, folks. You will not believe what's going on. It's going to seem like I'm making it up at some point, but I'm not. It's all real. What say you, Philip?
Yeah, first of all, I can't wait for the movie. I'm sure it's going to be another great addition to the two you've already done. And, I think it's just real interesting that we're looking, at the world around us these days, and we're saying people are sick and maybe there's some issues with the climate. And our answer to all of this seems to be, we have to get away from all of the things that have been going on for millions of years, the things that helped us evolve as humans for millions of years, the animals that have been on this planet for, millions and millions of years, billions of years, I guess, depending on how old do you think things are. And somehow those things have suddenly become bad for us and bad for the planet. And those two concepts just were never something that I could wrap my head around. And the only thing that I see is that these whole real foods and these animals that have been on the planet for all this time are bad for these business people, and they're bad for the food industry, and they're bad for the pharmaceutical industry, because if people get back to eating whole real food and they can raise the food themselves or do it locally, and it doesn't have to be heavily processed, and that food then keeps people healthy, we've now wiped out essentially two very large industries. And when you start to look at all of the things that are going on around us these days, you see those two themes coming through again and again.
Well, what's interesting is in the last presidential election, now, by the way, I don't do politics on this show, but I will say most of this came from the left, and I think I know why it came from the left. It's because on the right, there was only Donald Trump, right? So it was like collectively, Donald Trump was not going to do anything, Trump be Trumping, right? So he's going to just do Donald Trump. And he didn't get into the whole, Green New Deal or saving the planet or anything. He didn't have to. He was doing what he thought he had to do to win. But on the left, and it looks like in my movie, I might be picking on the left, but I'm really not. I just show the truth. And I have Kamala Harris, who did end up in office as vice president, when she was in a preliminary, in the primaries, when they were trying to figure out who was going to run for presidency, right? she's going, oh, we got to get meat out of here. We got to get, we got to, no more meat, right? None. Got to go. Cory Booker, who's a vegan, obviously he's all about taking meat out, and I'm sitting there thinking Cory Booker could have become president. Kamala Harris did end up one heartbeat away from being president. And that heartbeat is pretty weak at this point. So I'm wondering if she might not become president in 5 minutes. And if she would actually carry out this kind of stuff where they're talking about meatless Mondays and taking meat out of school and doing away with meat altogether. And they weren't the only two. A lot of the candidates on the left, they knew that in order to get that kind of vegan, that kumbaya vote, they would have to talk about no meat. Now, politicians, as I said, they'd be politicking. They're going to do whatever it takes to win, right? I don't know if they really believe this stuff. As a matter of fact, in my heart of hearts, I don't believe that Kamala Harris really believes that we should be taking meat out of schools. It's just a great soundbite. And when I bring this up to my friends, they'll say, she never said that. She never said, they'll say, no, you don't understand. I have footage of her saying that. Oh, that was doctored. No, this is actual footage. Nothing was doctored. This is real footage of her saying, I don't believe it. It's like, okay, I'm going to put it in my movie so that everyone can see it, right? This is what's going on. People have to understand that politics is about policy, right? These people are making policies that we will then have to abide by. And if this ends up in the Oval Office at some point, we could have a problem, whether it comes from the right or the left. This would be a problem. What say you, Doc?
Yeah, I agree with you, Vinnie. And I also, try and leave politics out of it, but more and more, politics is making it impossible. The politicians are making it impossible because they are enacting things that are directly, affecting the way that we want to live our lives, and we want to be healthy, and we know that's going to help keep people healthy. But for me, again, my main concern is trying to get people healthy, trying to keep people healthy. And, when they start talking about these concepts that clearly are not going to support the health of people, that's when I think, unfortunately, we're drawn into the fight, and we have to get into politics, because, as you said, if we don't, they're going to come and take away the things that are making people healthy. There has never been any evidence that these processed foods are good for people's health.
Right.
And as you said, these fake meat products, all they are another processed food. And, if you want to be vegan because of your beliefs or whatever, I have no problem with that. I even talk about it in my book, that there's a way to do that in a health, you can be a healthy vegan. It takes a lot of work, but you can do it. And you can remain metabolically healthy while being vegan. But you can't, I have the problem that I have, and I know the problem that you have, is when the vegans then come and say, well, because I'm vegan, everyone else has to be vegan and no one should be eating meat.
Right.
And I think that is clearly misguided. And from a health standpoint, that is clearly misguided. Again, we have no evidence that these processed foods are good for anyone. All of the evidence is actually the opposite, that they are not good. And the more processed foods that you have in your diet, the unhealthier you're going to be. And the data on that is pretty clear. So to say, the solution to our problems is to get more of these processed foods out there. And I don't care what the processed food is trying to substitute for. The reality is whatever the processed food is substituting for, we'd be better off eating the real food instead of eating the processed foods.
Amen. And look, as I've always said, vegans are not bad people, but they do have a radical part of the whole vegan group. As I've always said, you've never seen a meat eater go to a vegan restaurant and protest, like right in the middle of the meal, run in and disrupt the whole restaurant. I've never seen a meat eater go to a farmer's market where they're selling vegetables and say, you're killing corn or you're hurting the earth, which they could, but they never do it. But the vegans always go to butcher shops and restaurants that serve meat and what have you, and disrupt all the time. So it is kind of a double standard. Folks, the one thing that's not a double standard is Belcampo, Belcampo, B as in boy, Belcampo, sponsor of this show since late last year, and they're still with it. I love myself some Belcampo. Good stuff. Anya Fernald was on this Friday show again recently talking about the kerfuffle that happened in one of their stores in Santa Monica and how they've gone out of their way to make it right. Belcampo, go there for all of your meat. They also have chicken. They have pork. They have everything. And those meatballs, they're NSNG approved. Because I talk about them, they can barely keep them in stock. Here's the deal. Meat ain't cheap. As you see, the prices are going up all the time. You want to get the good stuff. You want to save some bucks. Go to Belcampo, put in promo code Vinnie, 15% off. VINNIE, no wimpy Y, 15% off every single time. Here's the deal. If after the discount, you are still over $100, say $101, even $100 on the nose, you will get free shipping, and that's huge. Belcampo.com, promo code Vinnie at checkout. Spend about $120. I see a lot of people doing that. They get it. I see the bills coming. I get to see what comes in. I don't see your name, but I see what you guys spend. Some people, like my mom, gets $300-400 at a time to fill up her deep freeze. Some people spend $100, $125. So after the discount, it comes right down to $100. They get the free shipping plus the 15%. It's the deal of the century. Belcampo, promo code Vinnie. Go check them out. Stay off of my operating table. Dr. Philip Ovadia is with us today. He's been on the show before. He's a favorite guest around here. Philip, tell us about the book. Why did you write it? Why did you feel like you had to write it? And tell us what it's all about.
Sure, Vinny. I felt compelled to write this book because, as we were discussing earlier, we have to get this information out to as many people as possible. And, I've been doing more and more podcasts. And of course, I have the patients that I metabolic health telemedicine practice. But ultimately, to get the information out to more people, I thought, a book would be a great vehicle for doing that. And in the book, I try and just lay out some very simple concepts. I don't have a diet plan that I'm selling. There's no Ovadia diet. But what I do is I talk about metabolic health, which I think is really the underlying concept for all of these things that, we talk about. People focus on losing weight, and people focus on, their cholesterol levels and all of these different things. And I think one of the mistakes that we've made at a high level in healthcare, in medicine, is that we don't focus on metabolic health, because it turns out that metabolic health is at the root cause of most of the chronic diseases that we face. When you look at things like heart disease, and you look at diabetes, and you look at Alzheimer's disease, and you look at some forms of cancer, the thing they have in common is that they start with poor metabolic health. So I talk about what metabolic health is. I talk about how to measure it. And then I talk about that the main way to improve metabolic health is through your diet and lifestyle. And I go through, what you need to do. Again, the big concepts that you need to do to improve and maintain good metabolic health. And, from a dietary standpoint, again, I don't have the 28-day diet plan. I don't give you, real recipes or anything. What I do is I look at 5 or 6 of the popular, kind of diet plans out there. And that literally includes both carnivore and vegan, and it includes the Mediterranean diet, and it includes keto. And I talk about what within each of those diets support metabolic health and what doesn't support metabolic health. And they each have their pluses and minuses. And in the end, I, end up kind of laying out a couple of, overarching concepts, a couple of principles that anyone can use to support their metabolic health. And first and foremost in those principles is eat whole, real food. And I think if we could just get back to doing that, we would find ourselves in a lot better condition as a society.
Phil, give us your definition of metabolic health, and do it, as I always tell everyone, doctors usually come in a little too hot and heavy with terminology. Talk about it as if you're talking to a fourth grade class.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I have a little audio hitch there. I think ultimately, the best way to define metabolic health is there are 5 measurements that are used to officially define metabolic health. And those are your waist circumference, your blood pressure, your fasting blood glucose level, and then your HDL cholesterol and your triglyceride levels. And those 5 measurements, I think, are measurements that everyone needs to know. And they're very simple. Your waist circumference, you can measure at home. Your blood pressure, you can measure at home, or you go to any drugstore, grocery store these days, and they all have the cuff laying around it. You can, put your arm into the machine. And then the blood work, the glucose, the HDL cholesterol, the triglycerides, all, are on basic blood work that pretty much any physician checks as part of a routine physical. And if we just look at those 5 things, we know that 88% of the adults in the United States, and this data is now as of 2016, but 88% of the adults in the United States did not meet all 5 measures. And if we could just get to a point, if we just focused on those 5 measures and figured out what improves them and how to get them in range, again, people are going to end up a lot healthier. And what I tell people about metabolic health is if you do the things that are going to get those 5 measures in range, all the other things you're looking for are going to happen. You're going to get to a healthy weight. You're going to feel better. You're going to have more energy. You're going to give yourself the lowest risk of developing heart disease and the other chronic diseases. So I think it's a very simple concept that for whatever reason, again, when you go to your family care, to your family physician most of the time, they have that information available. They just don't use it. They don't look at it, as that simple concept of metabolic health.
Philip, you're a lot younger than me. I'm going to be 59 years old in a couple of days. There was a cereal company, I want to say it was either Special K or Total, back in the 80s, that ran an ad that said, if you can pinch an inch, you're too fat. And we're talking 1979, 1980, 1980, somewhere around there. I can't remember. Yep. But it was all about if you can go to your oblique and pinch an inch, you were too fat. That's how much we didn't have a weight problem before we had the onslaught of the pyramid, right? Now, if you can pinch an inch or less, you have yourself an Instagram account with 1 million people looking at you in bikinis. It's become that much of a change, where we're now, as I always say, there's no fitness middle class. You have these super ripped out people over here, and over on this side, you have, 12-year-olds who have metabolic syndrome, right? So we've come so far in 40 years, we've come so far, right? Give me an idea when you say waist circumference, what we're talking about to be healthy today. And then I want you to do the same thing with triglyceride, HDL, all the ones you mentioned to measure. And by the way, folks, this is not medical advice he's giving, even though he's a doctor. This is just a model you might want to look at. Right, Philip?
Yeah, exactly. And, I'll start off by saying if anyone wants to assess themselves, you can go to ifixhearts.co. And I have a metabolic health quiz that marches you through, takes you through all this. and we'll tell you where you are on the scale. But basically for waist circumference, if you're female, you want that number to be under 35 inches. And if you're male, you want it to be under 40 inches.
And we're talking around the belly button.
Just above the level of the belly button, yep, is the way to measure that.
Okay.
And so it's not quite your pant size. It's a little bit different, but that's a very simple measurement. Anyone can take it home. Your blood,
anything to do with height? I mean, if a woman is 5 feet tall versus 5'6", I mean, there's got to be some leeway there, right?
so, you know, the official definition from a medical standpoint doesn't take into account height. I tell my patients, I tell the people I work with, I want your waist circumference to be less than half of your height, ideally. But the official, like I said, the official guidelines do not take height into it. And they only look at the waist circumference by itself. In terms of your blood pressure, the first thing is if you are on medication to lower your blood pressure, you've already failed that measurement. But without medications, you want your blood pressure to be less than 130 on the top number, less than 85 on the bottom number. For fasting,
130 on the top, 85 on the bottom.
Correct. Yep. Less than that you want without medication. For your blood glucose, your fasting blood glucose, you want that to be under 100. And this is the United States units, milligrams per deciliter. And again, that needs to be without medication. If you are diabetic, you're on medication to lower your blood glucose, you've already, you know, failed that measurement.
A quick question about that. When do you want them to measure? I always tell people first thing in the morning before you put anything in your mouth. Any problem with that? Because my feeling is once you start putting stuff in your mouth, those numbers change.
Yeah, exactly. So this is your fasting number. So you're supposed to be between 8 and 12 hours fasted. Whatever time of day that ends up is fine, but as long as you haven't eaten anything for 8 to 12 hours, that's the number you want to look at.
Okay.
And then in terms of the cholesterol numbers, the HDL cholesterol, that's what people always call good cholesterol. And this number you want to be higher. The higher this number, the better. And the official, cutoffs for females, for women, you want it to be above 50. And for men, you want it to be above 40. Women naturally tend to have higher levels of HDL cholesterol. That's why the numbers are different there. So over 50 for women, over 40 for men on your HDL cholesterol. And then the final number is your triglycerides level. And that number you want to be under 150.
Well, that's pretty lenient, right?
It is pretty generous.
I'm coaching, when I'm coaching people, I tell them, look, you might be at 350 right now, and I know this sounds weird, but I want your triglycerides to stay under 85. And they go, that'll never happen. It's like, it will if you cut out all grains, all sugars. It will happen. Agreed?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think 150 is a pretty generous cutoff. You know, again, my usual metric when I'm working with people is I want your triglycerides to be less than double what your HDL cholesterol is. That ratio has been shown to, have some relationship to insulin resistance directly. But again, official measurement is the official cutoff is under 150. And as you said, even with these generous cutoffs, only 12% of the adults in the United States can meet all 5 measurements. If you have 3 of these measurements that are abnormal, that is the official diagnostic criteria for what we call metabolic syndrome. And metabolic syndrome means that you are at high risk for developing diabetes and developing heart disease and developing, some of these other chronic health problems. But I also tell people, even if you only have 1 or 2 of these measurements abnormal, that's a warning sign, because the data shows that people that have 1 or 2 of these abnormal tend to progress to the point of metabolic syndrome. They have a high risk of getting to overt metabolic syndrome within 10 years if they don't do something about it. So the earlier you start assessing these things, the more time you have to change them. and you can stop the process that's ultimately going to lead to you having heart disease and chronic diseases and ending up on my operating table. Again, as a heart surgeon, I spend most of my days, the most common operation I do is what's called a coronary artery bypass operation. And it's for people who have blockages, atherosclerosis, plaque buildup in the arteries of their heart. And they're no longer able to get enough blood flow to the heart itself for it to be functioning well. And that is the most common operation I do. And that is almost 100% preventable if we look at, these factors in metabolic health.
Doctor, I started traveling again a few months ago by plane. I did travel throughout the whole pandemic because I had to get back. I would drive around. I drove to California, I'm on the East Coast now. And when I first started flying again, I was waxing poetic at the beginning of the pandemic. And this was back when we thought we would be shut down for 15 days because that's what they told us, right? You're going to be shut down for 15 days. And then the 15 became 30. And that's when I was on the Adam Carolla show. And I said, there's going to be the COVID-15. As a matter of fact, the great Mark Garrigo started calling it the Vinnie virus at that point, because I started saying that more people are going to die from morbid obesity than the actual COVID. Now we're learning that most people who die from COVID are morbidly obese. And it always drives me nuts whenever these news outlets will say, this young woman, she was only 45, she was under 50 and had the shots and died of COVID with no comorbidities. And I'm looking at, they'll show a picture of the person and the face is big and round and the whole thing. And I'm looking at it going, look, I'm not a genius, I'm not a doctor, but this person was morbidly obese. The word morbid is in the obese problem. How can you say there were no comorbidities? And usually when you're morbidly obese, you have fatty liver disease, you have sleep apnea, you have high blood sugars, you have high triglycerides, you have all the problems. Those are all, correct me if I'm wrong, Philip, comorbidities, right? So something like COVID comes in and wipes you out. So that's one problem. The other problem is I was wrong about the 15 pounds because people did not gain 15 pounds during COVID. Of course, we stayed locked down a lot longer than I thought we would. They're saying now people have gained on average 35, 40 pounds. The first time I left Washington Airport, Washington International, and I dropped down into Atlanta and got out of that plane and started walking around the Atlanta airport, I was shocked at how fat the world got in 1 year. Have you noticed the same thing? Is it just me? Because I'm always looking at this. I love being out looking at a slice of life, right? The people around me didn't get fatter because I live with a woman who's an ultra athlete. She runs ultra races. She's getting ready for a 50-miler next week. I go out to, I shoot skeet. All of those guys stay in shape, right? They're moving around all the time. They're doing other things. I hang out with kayakers and people like that. My crew is staying in shape. But when I'm in Atlanta, I'm looking at 12 and 13-year-olds with real problems. How long before those kids are ending up on your table?
Yeah, it's pretty scary. And I actually fly more than you do. I spend all my time, as a heart surgeon, I now do what's called locums work, which means I travel around to hospitals throughout this country that are in need of heart surgery services. And so I fly a lot, and I've been flying a lot through all this pandemic, and I notice similar things. And the other, and the data now plays this out, as you alluded to, we have, on average, adults gained 35 pounds during the pandemic, and that was actually as of a few months ago, so that continues to go up. Even scarier is the data around obesity in childhood and what has happened to that specifically during this pandemic. We know it's been going up for, quite a while now, but the the rate that it's been going up accelerated dramatically in children during the COVID pandemic, and that paper discussing that came out recently. And as you said, what is that going to mean for the future? I can tell you the future's already here. I now not infrequently do heart operations, coronary artery bypass operations on people in their 30s and their early 40s. I open my book opens with a story around a woman, in her 40s who needed emergent open heart surgery. And those are all failures of the medical system as far as I'm concerned. For us to get to this point is just, it's quite frankly insanity. And I don't know how more and more doctors are not standing up and screaming about this. And there are some, but it's not enough. The other key point, though, that I think it needs to be made is it's not just obesity. One of the things I talk about in the book and that the data, supports is that you don't have to be overweight to be metabolically unhealthy. You can be lean and you can be metabolically unhealthy. And about 40% of the people who are normal or low, body mass index are metabolically unhealthy in that same study, that 88% are overall. So being lean makes you more likely to be metabolically healthy, but it doesn't guarantee that you're metabolically healthy. And that's another key thing, is that you got to look at these measurements to know whether or not you're metabolically healthy or not.
It's interesting because a good friend of mine, Lynette Carolla, she's built like a Barbie doll. The woman's now in her 50s, and she's built like a Barbie doll. She doesn't have an extra ounce of weight anywhere on her body. She goes to yoga classes. She hits the gym a little bit, as minimally as a human being can hit the gym. I'm just going to be honest with you. She will tell you, I do not like to work out. So she basically goes and messes around and just moves around a bit. And, but still, she's built like a Barbie doll and eats like a third grader at a birthday party, right? She will eat hamburgers from In-N-Out Burger or whatever, right? And I got to her and I said, Lynette, just because you look like that on the outside does not mean you are like that on the inside. And she started looking into it and she got herself under control. She was like, you know what? Even though I'm getting away with it on the outside, I still look the way I look. I really have to start taking care of myself. Right. And, a lot of people who listen to the show, we call it the Lynette Carolla effect. People who are thin, who look great, but you really got to pay attention. We had, do you know Christian Assad, Dr. Assad? I think.
Yes.
We probably talked about this story the last time you were on, but it's worth repeating. He's a Mexican heart surgeon who moved to the States at some point, and one day he did 2 heart surgeries or something like that, and both of the guys were under 30 years old. So he was in the teacher's lounge of doctors talking, and they were talking about, hey, where do you want to go for lunch or whatever? And Kristen goes, you're not going to believe this. I worked on I did a heart job on a 28-year-old and a 29-year-old. And they were like, yeah. What do you want for lunch? Saying, no, I don't think you guys heard me. These kids, they're kids. This is not supposed to happen this young, right? And these doctors said, what are you so shocked? We do this all the time now. This is not new news. He was flabbergasted over this. He couldn't believe what was going on. Now, when you think about it, Philip, we were not talking about that even 10 years ago. But now there are 20-year-olds getting, not 20, but 20, sub 30 getting heart surgeries. When is that going to become sub 20 and then 15-year-olds and so on? Do you see that ever happening if we keep going down this road? Or is there just some level of, well, they're healthy enough to keep this bad diet going until they get to 30 years old?
Yeah, I mean, there does seem to be a little bit of that. It's still unusual for, 30-year-olds to be needing heart surgery. But it is increasing. I mean, I've been a heart surgeon now for 15 years, and I can see the difference only in that short, time frame. And again, I think that it just, I don't know how far it can go, to be honest. I like to think that, okay, 20-year-olds are usually A, active enough, and then B, all this stuff builds up over time that they're not going to start getting there. But what I do see is that, if the kids are getting obese and metabolically unhealthy younger and younger, if it takes that 10 or 15 years for this to progress, and you're now starting it with a 5-year-old instead of a 25-year-old, you're right. We're going to end up in a situation where, I'm going to be operating routinely on 20 and 30-year-olds instead of the 50 and 60-year-olds that, are most common for me to operate on today. And it's a scary problem. And I really have started, people who follow me on Twitter will see it, kind of in my messaging. I get more and more critical of the healthcare industry and of the doctors every day. And what I say is that, we as doctors need to get control of the healthcare system back. We have completely lost control of the healthcare system. And most doctors, unfortunately, are trapped in a system where they are, kind of told what to do, and they have very narrow guidelines that they need to operate on. And they're really there just to sort of, run the test and check the box and give the prescription. And they're not stopping and saying, none of my patients are getting better. My patients are only getting worse. What are we doing here? Why aren't we standing up and, demanding that we have better for our patients, that we do better for our patients? And that's ultimately, what has kind of led me to where I am. It's partially my backstory, which we talked about last time, that I was overweight, I was obese, I was pre-diabetic, and I was going to end up on my own operating table. And thankfully, I was able to come across the information that I'm now trying to share. But as physicians, we need to look around us and say, what are we doing here? Why are 88% of the adults in this country unhealthy? Why is it normal for a 50-year-old to be on multiple medications? Why have we come to accept that? And I know you always tell the story about, when you went back home and, kind of had the impromptu reunion and no one could believe that you weren't on any medications at 50 years old. And again, that is the reality. We know that 60% of people by the time they're 50 years old are going to be on multiple medications. And we don't question it. We just sit there as doctors and say, this is normal. And we can't do that any longer.
It's interesting. I told this story on the podcast recently, but it bears repeating. Serena told me, it must have been 8 months ago, you need a GP. I said, well, I haven't had one my entire life. She goes, well, we're getting older. If anything happens, you need a GP who can send you to somewhere else. I said, so I need a doctor to tell me to go to another doctor. And she goes, that's about it. So I didn't argue. I just, okay, I'll go visit with this doctor. Now, here's the deal. I know that I'm heart healthy. I know that I have exactly zero. My calcium score is a 0, right? With the thing that they rub on your neck and the scan, I come up with zeros. With all the meat I eat and everything, I got zeros. My blood pressure, you want to talk about blood pressure. Anytime I could do it while I'm standing up, I don't have to sit down and relax. I'll show you, 108 over 69 or 70. I mean, it's crazy, regular low. My triglycerides, you never see a 70. You usually see a 50 if you do it. Blood sugars are always somewhere around 65, 65 to 70. It's all just very, very low, very normal. I go to this GP. She checks me out every which way you can. And she gives me a blood test. She goes, we're going to take some blood. We're going to send some work in and the whole thing. And when she called me a few days later, very, very alarmed. And she said, there's a problem. You need to be on a statin. Now, I realize at this point, I'm just a cat that's going to bat around the mouse on this phone call, right? And I said, really, a statin? She was like, yeah, your cholesterol, your overall cholesterol is too high. Just for anyone to know, my total cholesterol is around 200. And I said, too high? She goes, yeah. And she goes, I said, what about my LDLs versus my HDLs? She goes, they're pretty normal. I said, did you do a particle test? And she goes, no, we don't do that. I said, oh, so no particle test. No particle test. And I said, do you realize I wasn't even fasted when I took that test because no one told me to fast before I came in. So I was nowhere near fasted. So that test can't possibly be accurate. She goes, oh, well, I didn't know that. I said, you didn't know if I was fasted or not. You pulled blood for cholesterol. You didn't do a particle test. You're willing to admit that my HDLs and my LDLs are right in sync. And the first thing you did was recommend a statin? And she said, Mr. Tortorich, you're hostile. And I said, yes, and you're no longer my doctor. And I hung up. I mean, you see, I know these things. I know these things because I talk to people like you, Philip, and I talk to Christian Assad, and I talk to Eric Westman, and I talk to Brian Lenskis, and I talk to Trokalasian, and I talk to Tim Noakes, Pearl Motter, William Davis. They're all on this show. You see, I get to talk to these people. I know what's right and what's wrong because I get to talk to the best guy. But the average person would have been on a fucking drug right then and there. Doctor says I need to be on statin. See, most people are not me. They don't have the knowledge I have because of guys like you. Agreed?
Yeah, and it's unfortunately, this information does not get to the doctors. The first time I started hearing this information, again, my story goes back to hearing Gary Taub's talk originally. And it was at a medical conference, which I guess was good. But, here it is, basically a journalist, giving this information that I had never heard as a physician that ultimately led to me being healthy. And then, the first time you and I met was at Low Carb Houston meeting that Nadir Ali had hosted down there. And then I'm hearing from guys like Dave Feldman and Ivor Cummings, who are computer scientists and engineers, and they are teaching me things about cholesterol and heart disease that I did not hear in medical school and I did not learn in 15 years of training, and what the statistics around these things actually show. Asim Malhotra, who's a cardiologist over in the UK, just wrote a great book that I recommend to people called The Statin-Free Life. And what Asim says and what I say, and I think most of the physicians in this space say, is not that there is no role for statins. It's just that we have to have an honest conversation around what is their true benefit and what are their true downsides. And the doctors don't know those numbers. All the doctors know is that they have been, instructed by their medical societies for the most part, that if a patient's cholesterol, usually the LDL cholesterol number in particular, is over a certain number, you need to prescribe a statin. And the data doesn't really support that. And they can't have that conversation. It's not like that doctor came to you and said, Vinnie, your cholesterol's a little high, statins can lower your cholesterol. This is going to be the benefit, this has this much chance of, preventing a heart attack or saving your life. But this is also the downside of statins. They increase your risk for diabetes when you take them too long, and maybe some other concerns. But the reality is that most likely that doctor won't even know those numbers. And you really have to go outside the healthcare system, because the healthcare system is so captured by the pharmaceutical industry. that you got to go outside the healthcare system ultimately to get those numbers.
Well, you know, I didn't do that. I went to another doctor, a doctor I found because I never considered going to this doctor before because she's a friend. You know, she's a friend of Serena's, and you know they're in the running community together. And I was like, I don't know if it just feels weird if you kind of know the doctor socially. For me, I'd rather not know him socially because then they know everything. And so she's a runner. She's an ultra runner also. And I said to this doctor, I told her my story, and she said, that sounds weird. That sounds off. And then I thought about it for a few days. She didn't say, come in and see me. She didn't sell herself. A few days later, I just thought about it. I said, you know what? I'm going to give her a call. I gave her a call. Said, would you mind looking at my blood work? Can you take more blood work and just make sure everything is fine? And when I went in, she looked at, all the data, because all of you guys could just punch it in now. You're in a system, right? And she brought up, and the whole time, and she knows the other doctor, and the other doctor is well respected in my community. And she goes, she's such a good doctor. But this is what she was recommending. She was flabbergasted that this woman wanted me on a statin. Just looking at that one report, she was like, this doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me at all. And she kept going, why was she recommended? She couldn't get past it. We had a meeting. I've never had a doctor do this, but I'm a friend. We had a 45-minute meeting. Serena was sitting there with me, and she just kept pulling her hair out going, I can't even squint and see how she wanted you to be on a statin. And to your other point, low carb Houston, and a lot of things like that. There's low carb Denver, and I've talked at KetoCon and all these different things. I always laugh when I look around and I go, okay, they have Ivor Cummins on stage, an engineer. They have, as you said, Feldman on stage, an engineer. They'll have Amy Berger on stage, a dietitian. They'll have me, a lowly trainer. And the audience is full of doctors trying to learn. We're at universities, and the experts on the stage are people who do not have medical degrees talking to doctors who, as you know, Philip, you were there, are sitting there taking notes. And by the way, it's not just us talking at you. Most of us open it up for questions. So we're taking questions from people with medical degrees. And every time I go there, I sit in the audience and I look around and I go, it's bizarro world. We're non-medical professionals at universities talking to MDs, telling them what they should be doing. Am I wrong about this, or is that what you saw?
No, you're not wrong at all. And in a lot of ways, I look back now and I realize that, having the initials MD after my name has actually worked against me being healthy personally and, being able to help my patients in the ways that I want to. Because, if I'm out talking about this information, as we've seen with, guys like Tim Noakes and Gary Fettke, they can come after you. The medical board, you can get reported to the medical board because you're talking about information that kind of goes against the mainstream, and it can have implications, for your ability to practice medicine. And the only information that I heard, again, prior to hearing Gary Taub's talk and then, getting into the kind of the low carb world and all of that, was, the mainstream information around nutrition and medicine, which is basically just, eat less, move more, and eat low fat. And that's all you heard. And, so in a lot of ways, and I, in my own mind, had to get past that, when I first heard, Dave Feldman talk, and I'm like, this can't be right. I've been a heart surgeon for 15 years. This goes against, pretty much everything I had come to understand about heart disease. But I started looking into it and I started vetting the information, and it turns out it is correct. And then I, was fortunate to hear guys like Christian Assad and Asim Malhotra and, other physicians who are talking about this. So I know I'm not totally crazy. But in a lot of ways, like I said, having MD after my name, has been a handicap, has been a hindrance in me trying to get myself healthy and now to get my patients healthy. But thankfully, I'm kind of on the other side of that now. I am confident, in the information that I'm putting out there. I'm confident in the information that's in this book. And I think, getting this information in the hands of more people is going to be helpful. And that's what we're seeing. Again, you talk to guys like Brian Lenskis and Tro Kalasian. You look at the work that Virta Health has done and published their results on. David Unwin over in the UK, again, published results showing that it is actually helping their patients. And it's what I see in my patients now. Again, previously, all I would do is, I would do the heart surgery, and that's a great help to them in the short term. And I'm very blessed and fortunate to be able to do that for people. But I knew in the long term, I wasn't really, going to have a great impact because they were going to keep doing what they were doing. And, the data shows they have a high likelihood of coming back and developing other problems. And now I have the tools available that I can say, listen, I did your heart surgery. We fixed the problem in the short term, but now we got to address what got you here and how we can, prevent this from being a long-term problem for you.
Yeah, I've often said you could give an alcoholic a new liver, they're still an alcoholic.
Yeah.
It doesn't change anything. Folks, the one thing that Dr. Philip Ovadia, Kristen Assad, Tim Noakes, Tro Kalasian, Brian Lenskis, all of them can agree on, Tony Hampton, we throw his name out, a lot of great doctors out there, is olive oil. Olive oil is healthy. It's heart healthy. It's good for you. It's good for your body. I use olive oil like I take my vitamins because it's just that healthy for you. You need to get it every day. And in this country, we allow olive oil to be cut up to 40%, and they can still call it real pure olive oil. You do not want that. You don't want that to happen. So what you want to do is go get Villa Cappelli. We had Stephen Crutchfield on the show, on the Monday show a couple of weeks ago. He still runs Villa Cappelli, even though his partner, Paul Cappelli, passed away. Villa Cappelli is still 100% pure olive oil. You will taste the difference. This stuff, as I say, all you need to do is add a little salt to your salad and put some Villa Cappelli. It's a dressing all on its own. So go check it out. You want to save 10%. Put in promo code Vinnie, VINNIE. If after the promo code you're over $100, you get it all shipped free. That's not hard to do. Just get a 3-liter tin, get some of their herbs or whatever else they're selling there, and get it right over $110 minus 10%, and you will get a 10% savings overall plus free shipping. You can't beat that. And 3 liters of olive oil, $100, that seems like a lot, Vinny. That will last you a long time. Okay, it's like a big gallon jug almost. Just go get it. Villa Cappelli olive oil, promo code Vinny. Philip, before we let you go, we're going to hype your book right here at the end again, and also your website. Any words of wisdom to people who are thinking about changing over to a low-carb diet or thinking about changing? What do you say? What's the first step? What would you tell them to do?
Yeah, like I said, the first step is assessing your metabolic health and then figuring out something that's going to improve your metabolic health. And that might be low carb. It's not only low carb, but the biggest principle I think that any diet, any way of eating needs to incorporate is eat whole, real food. I think first and foremost, that's probably the thing that, all of these warring diet camps agree on is eat whole, real food. But assess your metabolic health. And then as you're looking to make these changes, measure the change that it has in terms of your metabolic health.
Yeah, I'm always telling people who are morbidly obese, you didn't get there in one day. Don't try to change it in one day. Start slowly and then slow down a bit. Don't have that diet mentality of, I'm starting on Monday. I'm doing it all on Monday. By Wednesday, you're back in the same hole. Start slowly. It could mean walking, get out, walk, start moving. start changing your diet a bit, get off of processed foods, just hone it down, hone it down. You can, Dr. Ovadia has all of this free stuff over on his website, ifixhearts.co. Go check it out. I have the free PDF at vinnietortorich.com. All of this stuff is free, folks. This is free information you can get from an idiot or a heart surgeon. So go get it. It's all there. It's all free. Also, go check out Stay Off of My Operating Table. The book is pre-ordered now. Where can it's on Amazon pre-order. Where can you get it?
Yeah, right now it's up for the Kindle version is up for pre-order. The print and audiobook versions are going to be up there pretty soon. Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, all the kind of major online booksellers. The release date is November 11th. And in the meantime, go get your pre-order. And as you said, ifixhearts.co is the website. The first thing you'll do when you get there is take the metabolic health quiz, find out whether or not you're metabolically healthy or not. You can join my newsletter. Once a week I send out some useful information. Again, as you said, all free. And if you're interested in joining my practice, I do have a telemedicine practice that is focused on metabolic health and keeping people healthy, preventing them from getting on my operating room table. You can sign up for a discovery call with me and get all the information about joining my practice at the website as well.
Folks, go check it all out. Hang on. I'm going to turn off. Let's see, because hell, I might play music here. I can't possibly